is Philip Higgins and I'm the wildlife biologist for the City of Mountain View, and this is our restoration project along Permanente Creek. This project was funded by the Santa Clara Valley Water District, biologists from the City of Mountain View and several hundred volunteers from the community helped with the installation of the project. So over a 3-year time period we planted 1,000 California native plants of 30 different species. We've done it in phases. All the seeds for the project were collected from the local watershed, Permanente Creek watershed. They were grown in a local nursery, and then we planted them and monitored the site over a 3-year period. So at the end of the 3-year time period, we observed a total of 150 different species utilizing just a small little area here. We saw mostly invertebrates, native birds, mammals, amphibians and reptiles. So the project is completed now. We're just going to continue with monitoring and see will the project actually expand. One of the big issues we had at the project site was non-native invasive plant species. They're competing with the native plants, so we have been removing them, and we want to determine which California native plants will compete with the non-natives and actually expand and enhance the habitat for wildlife. Riparian habitats in general have declined significantly throughout California, especially along Permanente Creek here. If you go further into the city, you'll see some channelized areas with no native plants or even non-native plants. It's just all concrete. So we've seen the benefits of planting natives and how it attracts a lot of wildlife to this area. So this is one of the native plants that we planted in this area. It's called marsh goldenrod. So another week or two, this whole area will be covered in a sea of yellow. This plant is great for attracting insects. Then later on in the year, it produces vast amounts of seeds, which attracts a lot of songbirds to this area. We've seen goldfinches, San Francisco common yellowthroats, which are an endemic species around this area. So a lot of benefits for planting this native plant. It actually is a plant that propagates on its own and spreads out, which is really ideal to help compete with the non-native plants. Especially the height of it, it's a good plant for restoration project sites. Okay, we're now at the Shoreline Sailing Lake Island. There's very few islands in the South San Francisco Bay Area. So islands are very important habitats for nesting birds, especially water birds, so they can escape from terrestrial predators. So on this island, you can actually see some cormorants. They're not nesting on the island, but they are just foraging and resting at the moment. So you can see some of them with their wings spread out. So cormorants are birds that dive underwater to capture fish, but they don't have oil glands like typical water birds. So once they come out of the water, they have to dry out to stop them from getting hypothermia. The black and white birds with the long red beaks are black skimmers. So they're actually a protected species. They're listed as a species of special concern here in California. So they are nesting on the island. They're very unusual birds because the lower mandible or the lower portion of the beak is much longer than the upper mandible. So what they do is they fly along the top of the surface of the water and they skim the surface. The lower part of the beak is in the water and the upper part of the beak is left open. So if they come in contact with a fish, they close the beak while they're still flying and take it back to eat it. So black skimmers, they don't make a nest per se, they just make a little hollow in the ground. And typically in the past, they've been nesting on the hilly part of the island. So unfortunately the eggs were rolling into the lake and no chicks had hatched for several years. So for the past few years we've been putting up little wooden planks to stop the eggs from falling into the water. And since we started doing that, we've increased the number of chicks living on the island and surviving on the island. Okay, so we have 3 species of swallows that nest here at Shoreline. We have tree swallows, which are cavity nesters, and they're using our nest boxes. Actually this year, 15 pairs successfully raised chicks in our nest boxes. Then we have barn swallows, and right here we have nesting cliff swallows. So these are a migratory species, and we're at the end of the breeding season at the moment, so they are getting ready to migrate south. So they actually make their nests of mud and water. So typically, they're making them on the edge of buildings, but we actually constructed this structure here which is a substitute for some of the buildings, and we've actually had up to 15 nests at this particular structure over the last couple of years. So swallows are great for pest control. They actually catch insects on the wing, including mosquitoes and other small little pesky insects. Okay, so we're at Charleston Slough at the moment, and this location is another one of our restoration projects out here. So wetlands, salt marsh wetlands in general, don't have a great diversity of plant species. In our area here, there's only maybe 5 plants in the lower tidal area. Gum plants, cordgrass, saltgrass and pickleweed. But those plants, when they decompose at the end of the year, they produce vast amounts of organic material. And as that organic material decomposes in the mudflats, it attracts a lot of crustaceans and other species, and then vast amounts of birds come to live on those micro invertebrates. So San Francisco Bay is on the Pacific Flyway. So every spring and every fall, thousands of migratory birds underway from South America up to the Arctic to breed, stop off at San Francisco to refuel on their journey up there. And then in the fall, on their return migration, they come back here to feed again. So in the background you can see some American avocets, some gulls, black-necked stilts out in this area. So we do 4 surveys of this area every year, and we do one survey at low tide and one survey at high tide, and we've counted up to 10,000 birds of 30 different species just in one survey alone. It's a very, very important birding area, and just another example of the wealth of diversity that's in this area. So we're at Shorebird Way at the moment, and this is actually the location of the largest egret rookery in the South San Francisco Bay. So we have over 100 nests at this location from 3 different species. We have great egrets, snowy egrets, and black-crowned night herons. So what's very unusual about this location is all these 3 species are water birds. This is a very, very urban area. If you look here, we have a road, trees, and buildings on both sides of the road. So the nearest water source is over at the Stevens Creek, which is the other side of this building and the other side of a parking lot. So every year the City of Mountain View closes down this street for safety purposes, both for the birds and also for vehicles. So you can actually see on the ground here the birds are pooping. They eat fish, so it can be very, very smelly. And over on the sides of the buildings you can actually see some of the juveniles from this year. So if there was cars parked here or cars driving up and down, as the juveniles walk out on the road, we're trying to decrease the mortality rates for this species. So a very urban area, great success story for how birds can live in very urban areas. Okay, so thank you for joining us today. My name is Phil. Once again, I'm the wildlife biologist. Come out here and see some of the beautiful species out here. We have over 20 protected species, birds, plants, a great diversity of species. There's lots of areas to watch wildlife. We just ask you abide by all the rules, don't disturb the wildlife, but come out here and enjoy them. Bye-bye.